way to look at the jobs report, given all this talk from, Elon and Ramaswamy about cutting. The federal workforce is a place they would really cut into. Have you started to think about whether that's something that might be, in the cards for next year?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think they'll take a crack at it, and they may be able to reduce the workforce a bit. But I'll point out that about 3 million folks work for the federal government today. That's about the same number of people who worked for the federal government 50 years ago. So the number of people working in the federal government has not changed appreciably at all. And as a share of total employment has continued to decline and is as low as it's ever been. So, I think it's a reasonable thing to consider. Not a bad idea to work to try to reduce costs, but I think that's going to be pretty tough to get much cost reduction here. The federal government is already operating pretty leanly, at least in terms of the jobs that
That's interesting on a relative basis, right? Or on a historical basis. So when you look at next year and try to project the economy and what's going to be happening in the labor market, you don't think this will be something significant that, if they start to cut into the federal workforce, that our job growth might get hurt by that, or?
Well, I think it's probably thousands of jobs a month. In our baseline outlook, we're assuming maybe federal government employment comes down 100, 200K from where it is now over the course of the next couple of 3 years. So, it's fewer jobs, but in the grand scheme of things, just to give you context, we created 227,000 jobs last month. So that just gives you some sense of scale.
Yeah, there's the numbers, 227, unemployment rate 4.2. So I guess the big picture question about this now, changing administrations, there had been this argument that Trump's inheriting a pretty darn good economy. Is that true, or there's some holes in it? How would you describe the economy now that's being handed over to Trump?
Exceptional. In aggregate. If you look at pick your statistic, jobs, GDP, unemployment, stock market, housing values, the whole shooting match, the economy's doing very, very well. President Biden is handing off a exceptional good economy to President Trump. Having said that, that's the entire elephant. Obviously, different groups are going to be experiencing different things. And I do think high-income households, high-net-worth households, fabulously well. Things have never been better. Middle-income households, it's okay, not bad. It's about typical. Lower-income households has been a struggle. So it depends on what seat you're sitting in, But again, in aggregate, in total, we're doing fabulous well. And by the way, Connell, we're doing better than any other big economy on the planet by orders of magnitude.
Yeah, I've seen all those numbers. We're the best economy in the world when compared to all the rest of them, and that's all true by the numbers. What would you say to someone sitting at home who says, this economist, because the economy in the election obviously was an advantage Trump. It was a negative Biden, and this feeling that people have, and maybe it is on the lower income side that you're alluding to, but I think it's a little bit more than that, is that it's not as great as it's cracked up to be. What do you say to that argument?
Yeah, I wouldn't dismiss it. I think people feel that way. I think it's two things. One, they're paying a lot more for groceries and rent, and to a lesser degree gasoline, than they were 3 years ago. So inflation is back in the bottle, but it's not like prices are falling. They're still a lot higher than they were 3 years ago, all back to the pandemic and the Russian war. But nonetheless, if I'm paying 25% more for my rent and my groceries, that doesn't feel good.
Right.
And the other thing is our fractured politics. Everyone is looking at the world and the economics of the world through their own political prism. Take a look at that University of Michigan survey. I don't know if you follow that, but that's a survey that's been done monthly for, 50, 60 years.
Mm-hmm.
The survey that was done after the election, the most recent one, shows that Republican sentiment, when they ask a bunch of questions and then ask, are you Republican, Democrat, or Independent? Republican sentiment went from, this is the worst economy I've ever seen in my entire life, worse than in the teeth of the pandemic shutdowns during the Great Recession, to, it's not a bad economy.
No, I get it. Right. Well, that was like when they asked, was it a fair election? A lot of Republicans in 2020 said no, and then like 90-something% this time said, of course. Yeah, it was that. So, you're right. That's and both sides see it the way they want to see it. Thank you, Mark, as always. Mark Zandi, one of the better economists on Wall Street now. Penn State. Thanks so much for watching. Just go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.